And we are live right now. So welcome everybody. Welcome to the Senate District 59 DFL 2022 Candidate Forum with our legislative candidates representing State Senate District 59 and House Districts 59A and 59B. So welcome and let's introduce ourselves representing 59.
Thank you so much, Conrad, and all the others who are responsible for us being here today. Thank you for all those who are listening. Today is an important day. I am your current state senator, Bobby Joe Champion, and I've been representing our district. I first got elected in '08 when I was elected to the House for 2 terms, and then on to the Senate once our wonderful former state senator, Linda Higgins, decided that she wanted to become our county commissioner. So thank you so much for having me this morning.
Morning, everyone. I'm current state representative Fu Lee, House District 59A. I was elected in 2016. Just want to say thank you to our Senate District 59 DFL team, the committee for putting this convention for all of us to get together. You know, unfortunately, we can't be in person because of the pandemic, but really looking forward to continue to see what we can do to push our DFL message across the district and to help our statewide candidates as we move forward this year. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Esther Agbaje, and I'm the current state representative for District 59B. I was elected in 2020. And again, I would just extend my thanks to the Senate DFL team for making this virtual convention possible for all of us. And I look forward to chatting with everyone today. Thank you.
Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us. Of course, public safety has been on everybody's minds the last couple of years, especially, and recently in both the north side and downtown all across our district, some issues of kind of reckless driving and as people say, hot rodding and other things like that have been happening. And so several questions came in about where the state legislature and their policy and funding intersects with the local government role in addressing public safety when it comes to these kind of driving complaints and things like that.
Well, thank you so much for that question. And let me start by saying this. Our legislative team, we are a team. So we work hard together. So many of the comments that you're going to hear are things that we've been talking about and fighting for as a team. And then what will happen is that if I missed anything or if someone wants to embellish on something, that they will certainly do that. So I just want to make sure that the audience knows that. Public safety, as you know, has been a really big issue in the state legislature and especially in our district. One of the things that we often say is that it's not, we believe that people should not only be safe, but feel safe. And in order to do that, we think there has to be a comprehensive approach to public safety. As you probably heard, the House wants to do something around 300 million, and the governor, wants to do 300 million. The Senate minority wants to do somewhere around 500 million, and I believe that the House is somewhere around that as well, where our GOP colleagues only want to invest about $100 million. To get to your question, I think it's important to note that we're thinking about this comprehensively, as I mentioned. One, we do think that there has to be some increased support for community interrupters or the people who are working in our communities, making sure they're developing relationships with our communities, because we think it yields great results. When there are better relationships and trust, then the community feels as if they are invested and they can also work with law enforcement. Of course, there has to be some increase around law enforcement because if you deal with something comprehensively, you can't just support one aspect of a plan and not think about a comprehensive aspect. One of the things that we have also been talking about around public safety is how you have to bifurcate adult issues and juvenile issues. When we think in terms of adults, we believe around drag racing and those other things. And this happens with juveniles as well, and I'll get to juveniles, but with adults, there are laws in the books in order to make sure that people are driving safe, not driving reckless, and there are ways by which to deal with that in real time when we see, like in Cub, a parking lot, for an example. There's a lot of donuts and drag racing, also in downtown Minneapolis and just other places or spaces, even on Penn and Broadway. So there are things that need to be that's being done about that, but it also requires resources, right? So the state has to make sure that we are doing local government aid or even investing in some of these public safety packages that would include resources so that our local municipalities are able to deal with the issues that are creating some havoc. On the juvenile side, we also recognize that young people's brains don't fully develop until 25, but we still have to make the investments when we think in terms of prevention, intervention, deterrence, all the other things in order to make sure that our young people get the support that they need from trusted adults as well as at home and at school. So one thing that I've noticed is that in the juvenile area, that there are no programming for them anymore. Even when we think in terms of where a judge can send a young person who has a first interaction with them, there's no programming that would help them get back into law-abiding behavior on every aspect of the continuum. So we do believe that there needs to be a robust investment with juveniles and placement options, but also support options in the community. So we recognize that young people are also doing the drag racing and carjacking and all the other things that are a real challenge. And if they don't see the consequences, then they believe that the behavior is okay, and we have to do something in order to make sure that their behavior is okay. So funding, local government aid, also more investments when we think in terms of these public safety packages in order to make sure that we can address this issue of drag racing and donuts. Thank you.
Thank you. And so Senator Champion referenced the House legislation that is working in parallel to the Senate legislation and the governor's proposal on public safety. Representative Abaje, would it be possible to kind of break down what the House proposal is and how it works with the different proposals that are on the table right now?
Sure, thanks. So essentially, the House proposal is really focused on a balanced approach between funding police, making sure that they have the innovative tools that they need and the data that they need to do their jobs effectively, as well as additional policies for accountability. We also have funding in there to support, as Senator Champion said, community organizations who are on the ground and kind of have the pulse of the community. They are probably the ones who know best who might be most in trouble or at risk of getting into trouble, and hopefully can kind of step in before something bad happens, as well as people who can kind of gather around families to support them if they do need that support after either violence has occurred or to help survivors. So the type of funding that we're proposing is meant to be both balanced and have an approach on kind of both sides of the issue, but also understanding that, as Senator Champion said, it takes much more than just the actual impact of the situation, whether it's carjacking or doing donuts in the streets or other types of community harm, but really understanding what happens before someone makes that choice. And so we also have additional funding in other areas to support investments to make sure that people are getting the resources that they need before they need to make difficult choices.
And Comrade, if I could say one thing that I forgot to say, I think we nibbled at the edges on it. But whenever we think in terms of public safety, we have to also deal with the root causes of public safety, because we think that these balanced and comprehensive approaches around housing, education, and other things are integral when we think in terms of being safe and feeling safe. So thank you so much.
And then, so for Representative Lee, what are some of those root causes that are being addressed by community programs in your side of the Senate district? And are those being directly funded by state funds, or is it kind of through local government aid, or how can regular residents get involved as either volunteers or advocates for these kinds of programs?
Thank you for the question, Conrad. And I think this boils down to the point that Senator Champion and Representative Bajay already have mentioned around education, where when the Republicans were in control back in 2003, I believe, under Governor Pawlenty, they have stripped away all funding for after-school programming. And so what's critical and what's needed in our House education proposal, we have funding in there to replenish, after school programming, $25 million for the next 3 years, and then $10 million ongoing, so that we could actually get to these issues about the root causes. We have different issues with regards to what we're seeing in our communities. And so making sure that we have high quality after school programming is key. Also, in our tax bill, we also have funding in there for Homework Starts with Home, to help stabilize our communities, so that they don't have to worry about not having a roof over their head or whatnot. And so these are just some of the additional items that I just want to put it out there, that Senator Champion and Representative Bajay have mentioned. And then also on what has been done. Last year, we were able to work with the Department of Education to make sure that some of the federal money through the American Rescue Plan that was coming into the state of Minnesota was actually used for high quality after school programming. And so many of you may know the after school network Ignite After School. We were able to work with them to make sure that we are targeting community organizations on the north side in our Senate district, throughout the city of Minneapolis, and actually the entire state, that focus in on our communities of color, students with disability, those that needs the help the most. They got some funding through the federal dollars that came through the Department of Education. And so these are just some of the items that were accomplished and that we're continuing to push forward this year.
And Comrade, if I can make one more statement, one of the things that Representative Bajay and Representative Lee and I have also been working on that we don't want to get lost is mental health. We understand that we need to make the investment around mental health for young people and those who are a little more mature. But we need to make sure that we are destigmatizing mental health, but also giving folks the tools, and also giving law enforcement the tools, even with a multidisciplinary team. If someone gets called because someone's having a mental health episode, how do we make sure that the right team is going out with the right training and right understanding, so everyone ends up being safe even in that situation? And even in school, when we think in terms of young people suffering, especially during the pandemic, from depression and suicidal things, just those other things. So encompassed in our discussion about a balanced and comprehensive approach includes front and center mental health as well.
Yes, definitely. Every issue is intersectional with many other issues. And one issue that is kind of part of the whole equity framework here is the environmental issues, especially on the north side. There's a question that came in about what are your goals and what can we kind of accomplish to advance climate action and climate justice. So I know there's been specific action on specific polluters, but what can we do at the state level, but also in partnership with local government? So first to Senator Champion.
Thank you so very much. Well, climate change is something that's real and something that we are really fighting hard around. And so when you think in terms of even the work that has been done with Northern Metals and really trying to get rid of Northern Metals, there's also some environmental justice issues that we are going to continue to push. For an example, recycling is important. Investing in weatherization is important. But we've been talking about, and Representative Lee and I have a bill around when permitting is going to be done. Let's say, for an example, when a business wants to come and we know that we need to decrease, greenhouse gas emissions. We know that we need to deal with traffic congestion. We know that there's all these things. So when someone is going to get a permit, that we want them to accumulate, all the toxins that go in the air in order to help determine whether they're going to give them that permit or not. In our Senate district, unfortunately, we have traffic stuff. We have the Northern Metals stuff that was here. We have a number of different businesses that are putting things in our atmosphere, and our health is being challenged by those things. So usually in communities where they're a little more powerless or not as politically active, you find landfills and brownfields and hercs and all the other stuff, right? But no one really stops to think in real time, when you aggregate all of that in the air, how does it impact our mental health, our physical health, and just the way we go by with our daily life. So we think that there should be that notion of looking at it all and making sure that there is environmental justice, so we have less hercs and landfills and greenhouse gas emissions and traffic congestion and all the other things that affects our health, because we have higher rates of asthma, hypertension, emotional stress. And so when you begin to look at all those other things that are contributing, we need to make sure that we are also investing, so that we are investing in solar, wind, and all the other things that will be important. We have the North Gate that Jim S. Staples has. We've been making some investments around that, and we want to continue to do that. So we are looking at it holistically, and that's what we're doing on the Senate side, but as a legislative team, that is also what we're doing.
Yeah, so for people who live in Senate District 59, what are some of the programs? And then, we have both sides of the Senate district, so there's kind of different programs for different parts of the Senate district. So starting with 59A, what are some of the programs that people living on 59A can do if they're a homeowner, or then also if they're a renter? What can we do if I'm renting a house? What can I do to help my landlord do the right thing there?
Thank you for the question, Conrad. And I would just add on to what Senator Champion has said. What's exciting for us in our House budget, the Environment Finance budget, is that we have the provision that Senator Champion talked about around cumulative impact. That's included in our budget bill. We also have funding in there for community pilot program to do local air monitoring. I really want to give a shout out to Roxanne O'Brien, who's been working with Senator Champion, myself, and Representative Bajai to making sure that we could actually get a program like that that's moving along in the process. And so we have in the environment budget $500,000 for that. We also have some additional funding for statewide air monitoring in environmental justice areas. And so those are areas, like the north side, other parts of the city of Minneapolis, and throughout the rest of the state that has been impacted by pollution and all of that. And so really excited for what we have in there. And then I think relating back to home, we also have funding in the climate and energy budget bill to fund more electric buses. And we know that the Met Council was struggling with some of their initial rollout of the buses, but I'm glad that those buses are back out on the streets. And then last year we were able to prioritize having clean buses in areas with poor air quality first. And so we're making significant investment in the infrastructure in the fleet that we already have, and putting in more money for that. And with regards to I think the housing issue, we do have in the housing proposal, and I hope that Representative Bajai could share a little bit more, assistance in there for renter, whether that's through the rental assistance program with supporters services, or those to help folks who, wants to get into home ownership. I think that's something that Senator Champion has been taking a lead on too. And so there's a whole host of initiatives that we have pushed over at the state that, we are seeing come into fruition or are moving along in the process. And I've been focusing on, how do we make sure that we actually have the physical infrastructure? And two of my colleagues are focusing on how do we actually help people who, wherever they are in their part of the life, whether they are, getting to home ownership, whether they're a renter, or whether we need to make sure that folks have the services, or like the shelters, emergency shelters. We're going to make significant investment into that too. And so I'll keep it at that for right now, and answer any more specific questions later if you have any for me. Thank you.
So we will get to housing. I guess I should have been more specific in my question. What I was getting at is that Senator Champion was talking about weatherization and like solar panels and things like that. And so for many people across our district, both, in downtown, east side and north side, people are renters, and so they don't have direct control over the kind of capital investments in their home. And so I was wondering, what can renters do in terms of helping help their landlord make the right investments for things like solar panels, if it's a single family house, or electrification, or things that the renter can maybe do themselves in terms of like a wind source or other energy saving programs that are either at the state level or the local level, or things that your offices are helping folks with, things like that.
Thank you for the clarification. I'll just put in a piece, and then the other two can go if they have additional information. So the federal government have put in significant money for weatherization, emergency weatherization. And so for anybody that lives in our district, if that's interested, you could reach out to us and we could direct you to the Department of Commerce, who is actually implementing the program with some of our local agencies like the Community Action Partnership in Hennepin County. And so these are just some of the initiative that's coming in from different sources, the federal government and the state government, that we can help residents, in Senate District 59 with.
And one of the things that I'll will say, we are also trying to make sure there are resources to incentivize landlords to do some of the things that we're talking about, whether it's, allowing solar panels. We're also trying to make sure that they're cleaning up properly so there's not lead paint there. We're also, pushing the whole notion of weatherization, because we do believe that the federal government is doing something, but we are looking at making an investment there. So if, like you said, comrade, if a landlord who is in control, because folks are renters, we want to create an incentive in order for them to say, this is important enough to me. There's investments that can be made and we all benefit, because guess what? That renters benefits because their utility bills go down. They are living in a much more safer structure. So we just think that is important. And lastly, I'll say this. One of the things that we're also pushing for is to make sure that money that is received by the state as a result of a settlement, like what happened with Northern Meadows. We think it's important for when the Attorney General's office and other people settle those matters, and there's a penalty and there's money attached to it, that money comes back into our district, because we're the ones who suffered from the actions of a Northern Meadows. So those are just other things that we're doing in order to try to make sure that our residents have access to resources in order to improve their circumstances. And we say, and a part of our motto is, if it's good for Senate District 59, it's good for the rest of the state. And so that's why we really fight the way we do. So thank you for allowing me to speak a little more.
And the last thing I'll add to that, Conrad, is so in addition to a lot of the solar, the energy incentives that we have, we're also looking at ways that we can start to move towards zero waste, which we also know helps with making a much more environmentally just area. And so I've actually been working with community leaders like Ajay Pugh and Nancy Gardner, who have actually been doing the work in their own buildings in their neighborhoods of working with landlords to put more composting and organics recycling in. So that's something, so that way over the long haul, I mean, we're starting right now with residents, but then we're looking forward to how do we work with commercial buildings? How do we work with organizations and institutions? And so this is a way that community leaders can get their landlords involved to apply for grant funding that would support initiatives to kind of change how we address trash and waste in our communities.
So on that issue of zero waste, I know there's been a lot of innovation around the idea of compostable packaging and also more recyclable packaging. Is there movement at the state level to incentivize or kind of, I don't know if a mandate is necessarily in the cards, but to have more incentives to have more recyclable packaging and compostable packaging? So for example, people who get packages that are in kind of an envelope, a padded envelope that is made of plastic versus one that's made of paper material. So it's the same kind of envelope, but one is recyclable more easily, or at least compostable if you put it in the garbage, versus the plastic one will stay with us for thousands of years.
So I could speak a little bit to that, Conrad. At the state level, right before the pandemic, we were trying to come together with a package around microplastics. We know that right now, even I think among all of us, we might have some form of microplastics within our system. But because of what happened with the pandemic, all the efforts around microplastics have stopped. And right now we're pushing the state agencies, the Pollution Control Agency, the DNR, when they're testing our water, to make sure that we have a better understanding and really have a solution towards addressing some of the concerns that you have said, specifically to packaging and whatnot. There's not really any proposal that's moving forward, but do know that, there is interest from us to really address the issues of microplastics. And I think for me, I really want us to look at there's this innovative technology out there. We're starting to come out around how do you do tracing, that you can actually trace back where the plastic is coming from, who are the manufacturers, and so actually having some corporate responsibility there, where if you're putting in plastics into our communities, you have to we need to find a way to have them take be responsible for taking care of the plastic, so that they're not getting into our drinking water or whatnot. And so those are just some of the initiatives that are going to be pushed. But as of this moment, for this session, we don't have any around packaging and whatnot.
And Conrad, if I can mention this, we are grateful for the House. The House has been doing an extraordinary job, and our representatives have been doing an extraordinary job around these issues. I'm in the Senate. The Senate majority doesn't even believe that climate change is real. so understand that we have that fight just to talk about Mother Earth and the importance of Mother Earth and our responsibilities collectively around, protecting Mother Earth. So we're going to continue to fight this battle and make sure that folks understand that it's real and that we have some responsibility and that we should do things and adopt policies that really make sure that our future generations will enjoy this great, wonderful thing that we call Earth.
And just to add to that, I think this is why it's so critical for all of us to be here today as Senate DFL, as the Senate District DFLers, so that we not only help elect Democrats here in our Senate district, but throughout the entire state too. The ability for our neighbors here in our Senate district to help each of us to get out there and help other candidates, so that we could turn the Senate blue, and we could actually maintain our majority in the House to actually advance some of these initiatives that we're pushing for. Because at the end of the day, the Chamber of Commerce, these big corporate industries, they're coming against the proposal that we have around cumulative impact. And so we need to make sure that we retain the House, make sure that Senator Champion become a chair in the Senate, and also to help the governor and lieutenant governor retain their position as our governor of the state, and so that we could actually move forward progressive legislation.
Yes, we are all going to work very hard this year to try to win back a majority in the state Senate, and also, of course, keep Minnesota blue 5 out of 5 at the top of the ticket. And so in the maybe 10 minutes or so that we have left here, I wanted to move back to housing. I know that we kind of got a little jump start on that before, but for Representative Abaje, I know that you have been working on some legislation regarding rent help, and of course, there's the American Rescue Plan. And then you recently made some remarks as part of a press conference. So I was wondering if you could kind of share kind of what is going on there for the people who haven't been on social media as much recently, and what the House is doing, and what we can expect from our Senate majority colleagues.
Right. Well, thank you very much for that question. So as we all know, housing is fundamental. If you don't have a safe and stable place to live, you're not really going to be able to do very well in other aspects of your life. So what we're doing in the House is we have actually put forward significant investments in housing. Of course, there's always more we can be doing, but we are leading with a really strong step. So we have about $50 million in down payment assistance. And this is really crucial because right now Minnesota has about the 5th largest racial disparity gap of home ownership between white Minnesotans and Black Minnesotans. And so with this funding, we can start to move the needle on that and hopefully begin to close that gap. But part of making sure that down payment assistance is actually going to be useful is we need to continue to invest in preserving and building more housing. So we do have a number of measures in there that would allow developers to continue to use state funding to preserve what's called naturally occurring affordable housing, but basically housing that has been on the market for a little bit, maybe just needs a couple of touch-ups and can go right back off. We're also looking at ways to support people who want to continue to build more housing, and especially those organizations and groups that are looking to build housing specifically to be sold to Black and Brown Minnesotans who have traditionally been left out of the housing market. On the renters assistance side, we did tremendous amount of work with the help of the federal government to stabilize people in their housing, especially those that are renters. We know that particularly in our area of Minneapolis, I think a majority of people who live in this area are renters. And so we had rent help assistance. That unfortunately, that program did have to stop at the end of January, but we have included in our tax bill an additional $25 million of funding to support counties across the state. So especially here in Hennepin County, but also across the state, to ensure that they're still putting out more rental assistance for people who need it, because we know people are still struggling from COVID. We know people are still not having stability in their jobs, and we can't allow precariousness in their housing to continue as well. And then finally, we're putting strong investments into shelter and transitional housing. We know that shelter saves lives. And so one of the things that we're trying to do, last year we passed a shelter task force. And so we're trying to make sure that we're using that funding that's going into shelters that will, that are culturally competent, that allow people to stay with their pets, that allow people maybe to stay with their partners or with their children. And so we want to make sure that shelter is definitely a piece on that road to more transitional or permanent housing. So we have housing in a number of areas. Oh, and the last area before I forget, and Shirley can talk more about this, but in bonding, we're hoping we can get some additional funding there so we can support the building and maintenance of public housing. That's an area that we really want to continue to see more investments over time, because I think the public housing area is really one that will really help stabilize our housing market over time.
And then Chair Lee, if you could expand upon that and talk about how the House is working with Senate colleagues like Senator Champion and the Senate majority there. And maybe Representative Lee had to step out. So Senator Champion, if you could talk about what is being done on the Senate side. I know that it's not easy, but that's why elections are so important.
Absolutely. So it's a great question. One thing I like to start by saying is everything that Representative Bajai says is correct. Needless to say, I didn't need to validate that. She's always correct, right? So one of the things that I really want to underscore, and Chair Lee would do this, is making the investment for public housing, right? Rehab. Just because someone is low income does not mean that they should live in substandard housing. And so we want to make sure that they're safe and that they're up to code and that they're a good place for folks to live. We also know that that when you own your home, it helps to build wealth. So we want to make sure that people have the opportunity to do home ownership. And one of the ways that we are doing that, Representative Bajai and I carrying a bill that's called 9,000 Equities. And the whole initiative is by Bill Wealth and David McGee. So I'm gonna give him a shout out. They are looking at a loan a fund and literacy and all the other things. And they have a goal of making sure that 9,000 Black and Brown people own their homes within a certain prescribed amount of time. And they have the ability to do that. And strangely enough, we got some money on the Senate side right now to help with that initiative. We are asking for 10 million. The Senate did 5 million, but I'm trusting that the House is going to help us out in that area. So the other thing that I want to underscore around housing and why it's so important, even though we already know this, as we look at our kids and especially in our Senate district, and there's those educational disparities, we understand that when families are stable, that there are better educational outcomes. And so I want us to not silo these issues, and just like you said earlier, comrade, how these issues work in tandem with each other. And as we are promoting the investments and building around affordable housing units, we want to make sure that there are contracts there that will incentivize folks who have developments that include affordable housing units, that they continue to stay online. And so we want to incentivize them in order to do that. But we also want the definition of affordable housing to be real. And so it be based on the area median income, not, we don't want affordable housing based on the high incomes in Edina or Medina or some of the other places. So we want to make sure that's happening. So when you also think in terms of infrastructure bonds, housing infrastructure bonds, that's one of the things that I'm sure that Shirley, who is now back with us, will be able to talk about. And so I don't want to steal his thunder. So let me stop right there and pause right there and toss it over to our wonderful Chair Fuli.
Well, thank you, Senator Champion. I apologize for that. And, having some internet connection issue at home. And so I think that's another issue that we need to talk about too, where there are federal funds coming into the state of Minnesota that the state should utilize to provide digital access for community members who may not have the ability or cannot afford, having internet access. I think that's a key point. And then both Senator Champion and Representative Bajai have touched on this housing infrastructure bonds. We want to put in $400 million in the House to make sure that we are actually addressing the housing need that we have across the state. And then also, I think key to what Senator Champion said was around public housing rehabilitation. When Representative Bajai and we went on tour last fall, we were in a building in South St. Paul where they were literally duct taping some of their pipes to make sure that, the residents there doesn't have to, struggle with, air quality and whatnot. And you think about that, in an environment where we as a state have a projected $9 billion surplus, our, communities, our public housing have to resort to using duct tape just to make sure that some of these infrastructure actually, remains intact for the time being. And so there's much more effort for us to do on this front. And I'm really excited and proud to know that, both of my colleagues here, have been prioritizing that as we move forward and making sure that that's included in the capital investment bonding bill.
And the last thing, Conrad, that I'll say on this issue, Chair Lee and Representative Bajai and all of us have talked about our seniors as well. How do we make sure that seniors are able to remain in their houses? They're usually on a fixed income. How do we make sure that they can rehab those homes and do all they need to do in order to feel like they want to continue to hold on to the asset that they have made investments around, for life, right? And so we want to make sure that, again, as we think about housing, that there's a full complement of housing options. There are the necessary investments in order to make sure that families will be stabilized. We've even talked about, should we think about, housing incentives to help people no matter where they live to fill a gap. It's just a number of things that we are thinking about. And I do thank Chair Lee for saying it. It is refreshing to have a team where we are fighting not only for the a benefit of Senate District 59, but again for the state of Minnesota, because we have people that look like us and that whose values align like ours all across this great state, and we want to make sure that we are doing our work to make sure our voice is added to the chorus of fairness.
Well, I know that there's a lot more that we could say about housing, and it's kind of getting close to the time that we need to close for today. But of course, we'll have the 15 minutes of Q&A during the convention itself. I wanted to have a final fun popcorn question. In the capital bonding bill, what, you don't have to explain it too much, but what is your favorite transportation project that we're maybe going to have if the stars align there?
Well, I can go first. I don't know if it's actually going to be in the bonding bill, but it's something we've all been talking about up here, which is obviously the blue line. So if we get funding for that, I think that would be great. We need that, economic development that comes with light rail and with transit and with trains. People need to move around not only for work, but for school, for play. It will bring more restaurants and things up here. And I think that that's something that's really necessary. And we need to make sure that we're doing it right. So that's probably a little bit more serious than what you were asking. But yeah, I would be really excited to see the blue line come to fruition up here. So yeah.
Senator Champion, your mic is hot. So what do you?
So I almost turned my mic off because I knew you were gonna come to me next. But let me say this: I don't know if it's fun, but it's something that's not even in our district that I think aligns with our district. Is really making sure the revenue and the money for Rondo stays in the bill, because they're trying to go back on the agreement that was that Chair Lee and others worked so hard on last session. In order to make sure that Rondo can be connected, and there's a bridge, and there's all these other things that should be looked at in order to right some wrongs when we think in terms of how road developments or highway developments went right through Black communities and communities of color. So I was fighting the other day. You probably heard a lot about this, but I was calling my Senate Republican colleagues out that you should not and you cannot renege on an agreement. That goes to the fundamental integrity of the body, right? And so
Contract law is older than the Republic itself.
Right, right. How about your word is your bond, saying that we're talking about that, right? So it's not in our district, but it aligns with our values in addition to what Representative Bajai already said. And I do thank Chair Lee and the others publicly who really fought hard in order to make sure that it was there. And that's why we say, if it's good for Senate District 59, it's good for others as well, because we really think about this as a guiding principle. So sorry, that's all I had. But next time I'm turning my mic off, Conrad, so that you don't call on me next.
And then Chair Lee, you are the final word before we wrap up.
Thank you, Conrad, for the question. And I think something important and what Senator Champion has just said there is key for one of the projects that's funded, that's currently going to happen in our district around righting past wrongs. In 2018, the state of Minnesota appropriated some funding through the Corridors of Commerce project. And one of the projects that's selected for funding is to transform Highway 252 all the way in the northwest suburbs down to 94 in our district in North Minneapolis to downtown. And what they are proposing there from the state, the Department of Transportation, is to add min-pass lanes. And these are, fast lanes for folks from, outside of our community to come in through our community downtown and to leave. And we don't stand to benefit from that. And so something that Representative Agbaje carried last year that we're considering putting in is to make sure that if MnDOT is going to put in a fast lane, that we encourage them and have some kind of transit alternative there so that our communities can actually benefit from the project that's going to come in on I-94, and that we're not just creating a fast lane for folks from outside of our communities from coming into downtown Minneapolis and leaving, and folks on the north side and our North Loop downtown area don't stand to benefit. And so that's something that we're continuing to have conversation on to make sure that we benefit from that entire project.
Well, thank you to all three of you for joining us this morning. Current time is 8:44 a.m. So you have what is that? 2 hours, 15 minutes to work out, get your stretch in, maybe go on a little walk or something, and then I will send out the registration thing for the forum for the actual convention itself as well, so that you have that in case you missed it. And so thank you all three of you for joining us today. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in convention We go live for the convention at 11 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.